Uh, Nick, can you fill in where would like for everybody to? I don't know what to do with this now. Hey, Dr. Burnett, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well,
How
we
are you
can't hear
all?
you yet. You have to unmute yourself.
I'm not muted. I am not muted.
What? Come help me.
Please come help my friend.
Is this a thing that you?
Oh, that one.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, it's going. One more time.
Yeah. Try.
Yes, how are you?
Very good.
Nice, nice.
That's the thing. I don't know what it is.
No, it's going up.
Yeah. This that's the highest it will go. The one over there, you can increase this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good, very good. Jenna.
Oh, she did it.
What is this? Scalar volume that divides. It's on here, mono left. Okay, because it's not, but it wouldn't be the speakers, right? It's the scalar one, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's on this one. I think this should be fine. Okay. Oop. Nope, that's not
I
it.
think it was on regular.
Oh Lord
You can
Jesus.
drop that.
My bad. Give me a sec.
All this name.
Oh, that's not it. We getting there. Ah. Okay, we're getting back. I was just right there. My fault. We getting there.
Oh,
Apologies.
you're good. You're good. You're good. You are. You
I
are
was just
good.
there. What's going on? Ah, got it. Wonderful. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so you should be able to see the class. Okay.
Nice.
So we welcome Dr. Rufus Burnett from Fordham University. Thank you for making the time to be with us this morning. As you can see, we're excited to be here, even though we look like we're asleep, but we're excited. That is an excited face. So I would like us to start off first by, if you please kindly tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, as John said, I'm Rufus Burnett. Yes, my parents did give me that 1970s name, Rufus. And I am an alum, first and most importantly, I am an alum of the Xavier University in Louisiana. And I am happy to call that my home, away from home. I didn't get to make it to homecoming this year, but I will be there next year for my 20th anniversary of graduating from the institution that you call your beloved space now. And I'm from just an hour away east from Gulfport, Mississippi. Anybody from Mississippi in the room? No Mississippians in the room? That's usually the case. It was similar when I was there. But at any rate, I grew up in Gulfport, Mississippi. Mississippi being one of the many homes of the blues. I started off at Xavier Biology pre-med and ended up taking or fulfilling all of the requirements, not only for biology pre-med, but for the theology minor. So those of you who know Dr. Joseph Drexler Dreiss as well, he was a year and a half behind me or so. and there's a host of other Xavier alums from the theology department that have pursued degrees in sociology, pursued degrees in theology and religious studies. And so it's good to be back home with all of you all. Needless to say, I did not become a physician, even though I did graduate biology pre-med. I fulfilled enough theology requirements to pursue a master's over at Loyola University up the street, uptown, and the rest is history. And so here I am with you all today, ready to talk about sound and music and blues and what in the world does that have to do with theology. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Burnett. Can you give us a background to your research and publication? So I told the class that you have not only done this research over the years that I've known you, but also you've published a book.
Yes, I can do that. But if you would allow me to deviate from a kind of a formal introduction, I wanted to start off with some sound. Okay. Because I feel like if we don't start there, I might lose you all. So can you give me presenter rights? I want to play a video. I'm going to answer your question, but I want to start off with some sound to get us there. So can I share my screen? Let me see. Yeah, it's disabled right now. So if you make me the host, I can share something.
Okay.
Oh, thank you very much. All right. You have a lot of helpful students in there, John.
Oh, yeah. When they want to.
All right. So what I'm going to play now is a way of entering into what I would call a sonic communion. All right. So I'm going to play something, and I want you, if you feel the need to join along in what the presenter is trying to communicate to a live audience, if you want to join along with him and try to follow him sonically, sing if you got a voice to sing, or just think what he's trying to get you to do in your head if you're a little embarrassed. I feel that this is the way we should start. So I'm going to share my screen and play this video by, anybody know Bobby McFerrin? Okay, we're going to start off with Mr. McFerrin. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Good, good, good. All right, so this is at a neuroscience conference, and this section was entitled Neurons and Notes at this conference, and Bobby McFerrin interjects into this deep conversation with all these neuroscientists, and he says, well, let me show you neuroscience at play, and this is what he does. Ba, 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 ba.
Oh, we can't hear the video.
Oh, can't hear the video? All right, let me go back. Let me reshare it. Okay, so optimize for video clip. That's what I forgot to hit. All right, let's go. Let's go back. All right. Better?
Talking about expectations.
We good?
Yeah.
We can hear now?
Yes.
All right, let's
Expectations. Watch.
go. Ba, ba.
Okay.
da da, ba ba, diddly diddy da da, ba da 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 ba 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 da 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 ba ba ba.
Yeah.
Can I get one volunteer to explain what just happened? What happened? Yes, in the back.
I'll try. It seems like the more he kept going left, the notes were supposed to go lower, and the more he kept going right, they were supposed to go higher. And the crowd was following along, even though they didn't have like specific instructions. They just fell in line and knew what to do. And he was adding different sounds along with it, but they still was consistent in moving, well, keeping up with his movement. There was a lot going on, but they was just consistent.
Yes, yes, excellent. What is your name?
Dominique Newton.
Dominique, you said?
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Dominique. Yes, what was happening there was humans could infer where the sound could go after hearing 2 or 3 notes in the pentatonic scale. That's what he was doing. After hearing 2 or 3 notes, they were able to go to the 4th note, right? Or if they heard the 4th note, they could go to the 5th note. And if they heard the 5th note, they could go to another scalar progression without being told what the scale was, without knowing the notes on the page or in any type of formal musical annotation. My work is trying to figure out what happens to humans, that we can do that together, but we have governments, politics, religions, languages, moral codes, ethical codes that somehow keep us from doing that together. So a lot of what my work is trying to do is trying to think about how the world of human unity, right, at a very basic level, all that diversity in that room, as you can imagine, but yet they were able to do that together. So what happens? Right? I'm particularly interested in the break that happens in what is called the Atlantic world. Right? That is the world that is built in the 15th century with the movement of Europeans west into the Americas and south into the continent of Africa. Most of you know this time period and what was happening, right? Right. So people were being bought and sold and traded. Humans were being traded for tobacco and rum and steel and so forth. And in that world, whatever just happened in that sonic reality gets obliterated, or the possibility for humans to come into unity, right? And in theology, we call this the kingdom of God. Some have called it the kinship of God. That's what my project looks at, but I'm particularly looking at it from the perspective of the break of that harmony amongst human beings, or the possibility for human beings to find what is common amongst them and build a world with respect to that is resisted in the transatlantic slave trade. And so there's sound in the transatlantic slave trade. The historian of religion and religious scholar James Noel talks about this as the moan. In the belly of those ships that were transporting human property from all different types of ethnic groups, Akan, Yoruba, Igbo, and I could go on. As they were being transported and forced into the hulls of the ships, they were being separated from their ethnic belonging. They were being separated from familial belonging. And some would say they were being separated in fifths. So, you know, at the beginning of a class, sometimes when you're being counted off into groups and you'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to split into groups. That's oftentimes how slaves were transported into the cargo hull of the ships. They would just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You go there. Didn't matter what the bonds of kin. Didn't matter what the bonds of language were in that fifth. So the moan, James Noel describes, becomes an initial utterance of the reality of interpreting the loss of family, the loss of culture, the loss of home, the loss that many of the enslaved would undergo. And he talks about this moan as an interpretation, as a critique, as a cry, as a song, and a number of different utterances, but there was no words to describe it. So the moan was fitting, as James Noel would say. The moan was fitting for this. So I see and study Black American music and Black American cultural production as a means of trying to interpret that moan. Because as time progresses, words get associated with that moan. Biblical texts get associated with that moan. Theology gets associated with that moan. Faith traditions, not just Christian ones in the New World, get associated with that moan. So you can think, if you're looking at the Americas and the Caribbean at large, you think about Santeria, you think about Candomblé, you think about Haitian Voodoo. You can even think about religions that are created here in the US that have memories of a past beyond the US condition. So like the Nation of Islam, Hebrew Israelite traditions, also those of you who may be hip hop heads know about the nation of the 5%er Nation associated with Islam as well. But in particular, my work focuses on the blues as a framework for interpreting that moan. Many ways of interpreting that moan, right? But that moan gets interpreted, it gets reinforced, it gets rethought as people progress from that moment of the Middle Passage into and up to the present. So we see the moan in musical art forms, right? You'll hit a moment in musical expression or even religious expression in worship where words just won't do, right? And so you moan. And that there's a vibrational connection there that I try to tease out in my work. So that was a long introduction, John, but I think that somewhat answers your question, but I can talk about the specifics of the book if you want.
Okay. I think that we have layers now of different things, but can you simplify, even though you've answered some parts of it, in the first instance, what exactly is the blues?
Yes.
From that tradition, and then you've spoken to some aspects of this, but as it relates to slavery and slave religion.
Right. So, as some of you may imagine, the ideas on which enslavement is built are categorical ideas that situate people in a sociality. or a social construct, right? So if you think about the way that a plantation is shaped, right? There's the big house, right? And then there's the slave quarters, correct? All right. Now, in that relationship, there are hard lines of distinction between those who own property and those who are property. And so those who are property have to find ways of communicating that don't disrupt overtly that relationship, because the social order is based upon this. So the other thing about plantations, if you know something about the geography of the South and the geography of the Northeast where plantations are, the Northeast, the Southern Northeast, like the Carolinas and Virginia and Maryland and so forth, plantations are spread out fairly far apart. So owners would oftentimes be outnumbered in the plantation space, right? Even though they would have middle person workers that would like oversee people in the fields doing labor, or oversee domestic labor, or they would have artisans coming in to help with building of the home, repair of the home, and so forth. That order had to be maintained. And so any activity that the enslaved organized on their own had to be organized with respect to maintaining that order, but also disrupting that order, right? So as you could imagine, religion was one of those things, particularly because religions, or at least the Christian religion in particular, and other faith traditions, any of the Abrahamic faiths, have this notion of freedom at the core of their belief system. And so it's not lost upon those who were Christians and enslavers, there's no secret to that, right? That the organization of enslaved persons would be a threat to that order. And that order required rendering the enslaved person as next to the animal in the chain of being. And so if they acted, of course, to the fullness of their humanity, there, of course, would be resistance. So music and slave religion become this clandestine activity of building community together, of sharing faith together, of sharing sound, meaning, knowledge together. So there's an alternative or shadow sociality within enslaved societies that goes on under the radar. One of my favorite songs that displays this is called Move Daniel, which is associated with the tradition called the ring shout. Anybody heard of the ring shout? Some people have heard of it, right? Well, the ring shout tradition is typically associated with the coastal Carolinas and the Sea Islands and Gullah Geechee culture. And there's a group called the McIntosh Shouters, if you get a chance to go and look at them, but they had a ring shout called Move Daniel. And the organization of the ring shout would consist of what they would call a stick man who would play the beat. The beat would usually go something like this. And the song that they would sing was called Move Daniel. And they would sing this at Christmas time. They would sing it oftentimes when there was a Christmas party going on in the slave house, in the big house. And the story or the narrative associated with Move Daniel that's recorded at the Library of Congress went something like this. So the owner was hosting a party. So everybody would come to the big house and there'd be music playing and people would be feasting in the house and wine would be being poured and food would be eaten, and the slaves would be outside singing this song called Move Daniel. And of course, the conversation in the house, oh, you have such well behaved enslaved people. You have your slaves are so well behaved, they're almost Christian acting. They're singing about Daniel. Well, what they did not know was Daniel was a slave who was trying to get into the smokehouse to get a ham. And the song is trying to direct Daniel to the smokehouse to get the ham out of the smokehouse for the other Christmas party that was going to be had outside of the big house. And so all the while, the owner is none the wiser that the song is directing him where to move to stay out of the visual of those who would have captured him and punished him for doing such an act. So that's a story to me that kind of like that kind of clarifies the clandestine nature of slave religion, which Albert Raboteau would call the invisible institution. The blues, the work songs, what would be called the slave seculars, and the spirituals are a part of this invisible institution. Ways of communicating humor, ways of communicating how to evade danger and capture during fugitive activities of the enslaved person as they were trying to escape in some cases, and just to deal with the everyday ordinary sufferings of enslaved life is a part of what Dr. Odeyemi is mentioning with respect to slave religion. The blues comes out of that. I can talk some more about the formal interpretation of the blues that you all are probably more familiar with, but that's the bedrock.
Thank you. Now, I've always wondered, is there a finding or research done on why at any point in history it was called the blues? Is there something behind? It could have been the yellows, it could have been the reds, it could have been mango. Why blues?
Yeah. Color symbolism is always at bottom ambiguous, right? Because I could say there's no reason why I stop at a red light except that the rules of the road tell me to, right?
Yeah.
The association of red with stopping is rather arbitrary. We could have said green means stop and red means go, right? Doesn't matter as long as we all agree, we're good, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So take that into consideration. But I will say that there has been research done on color symbolism, and the darker colors have always, in the West in particular, you can look at, there's two thinkers, Bastide and Shields. I can send you the sources. And I'm just quoting their last names. But Bastide and Shields did research on color symbolism in the West. And dark color, as you all might imagine, has always been associated with the demonic, with evil, with mystery. And the lighter colors have been associated with the sacred, white being the lightest, right? So the color symbolism of the blues has to do with the mood of being low spirits, being in low spirits. And some of its European forms, blue spirits has also been associated with the blue devils, which oftentimes was associated with having a hangover or being in low spirits as well. But the blues in the African-American tradition carry some of that color symbolism. But again, at bottom, that color symbolism is to some extent a kind of arbitrary notion, except that there is a kind of chain of the meaning of colors associated with moods. Some of you may have, I may be dating myself, but in high school, they used to have these things called mood rings. That's anybody know about mood rings? Right, and so it would read your body temperature, and it would change colors with that signature of your body, telling it what color to change and so forth. Right. But yeah, that's the extent to which the color, at least in my own research, matters. There's so much more at stake in the blues than the color symbolism, though.
Thank you. We know that things grow, so they develop. We've moved a long way from the slave chants. We've come a long way, and what is the blues today is totally different from where it originated from. Is there a kind of rough kind of transition that has brought us from the blues, from the slaves to where it is today, in developmentally, so to say?
Yes, that is a very complex history. I'll put it like this. Does everybody familiar with white abolitionists movement generally? William Lloyd Garrison and people like this. All right. So as you know, that abolitionists had a vested, now you also know Black abolitionists too, right? Like Frederick Douglass, people like Harriet Jacobs, right? So, of course, in people who were formerly or who were chattel, who were plucked by white abolitionists to represent the experience of enslavement, are being read from the perspective of the white abolitionists through a gaze. Right? And that gaze is making assumptions, it's making decisions, it's calculating the difference between what it means to be of European descent and what it means to be of African descent. And not always does the moral fiber or the moral impulse to free humans from the horrific nature of chattel enslavement move towards equality between Euro-Americans and what we would now call African Americans, right? So an abolitionist did not have to think that the African descended peoples who were property were on equal footing with them as human beings. And we have record that they did not think this. If you can understand that, then you can understand that how they recorded the cultural productions of enslaved persons oftentimes was kind of motivated or limited to this kind of African essence that they wanted to associate with these enslaved persons. So they were trying to appeal to, yes, they are human. Yes, they have virtue. Yes, they can think. Yes, they can do a semblance of all the things that we can do, but the degree to which they can do them is very different than what we have come to know as what separates us from the African. So much of the history that we have recorded about the songs of the enslaved, even early blues music, comes from that abolitionist tradition of receiving Black culture. So the first collection of the spirituals that we have in writing and musical annotation is called the Slave Songs, and it's recorded by a person by the name of William Francis Allen, who, along with another woman by the name of Lucy McKim, who had dealings and was related to, I believe by marriage, William Lloyd Garrison. one of the famous white abolitionists. So in this reception history, they talk about, oh, look at how spiritual their singing is. Of course, they had the slave seculars, and they had all these songs that were like poking fun at the overseer or poking fun at their owners and these kinds of things. But they don't talk about these songs as being in that collection of songs. They don't talk about these songs as being indicative of their humanity. They're trying to present them as docile. They're trying to present them as morally circumspect, because they're trying to suggest we got to live next to these folks if emancipation happens. So our vested interest is not to present them as running the full range of humanity, right? Right? From the best to the worst of humanity. Like, to be fully human is to embody the best and the worst of humanity, correct? Right? So they were interested in that. You see this in the early blues recorders, Alan Lomax, and John Lomax, in their recording of the blues. They were trying to find what they call the pure Black essence, or the pure Negro essence. This doesn't exist. This, the diversity of humanity is just too rich to associate an essence with ultimately something that's not real, right? Race is not real, it's constructed, correct? So they cannot be a pure race essence, right? Because race is constructed. It's not real. But at any rate, they were looking for this. The next major nexus is the development of the phonograph, or the record player. Some of you may not even know what that is. Some of you may not even know what CD player is, but the record player is another piece of technology that speaks to Dr. Odeyemi's question about the development through time of the blues sound and African-American music. That record player moment was initially used to do field recordings. That part of that technology was used to record live recordings. And so you had a transition from written recording of African-American cultural production to sonic recording of African-American cultural production. And then all of a sudden, as you know, the American music industry is born like in the 19-teens, 1920s. So you got RCA, Vocalion, and all of these major record labels, which is very akin to now. So you all know this. Go to any major radio station in the US, and you're probably going to hear the same 10 songs, right? No matter where you go. You could be in LA, you could be in Miami, you could be in New York. The top 5 songs are probably going to be the same, all right? So I'm just saying that as an example, that the record industry like controls how culture and cultural production is perceived, and it indirectly controls how local, everyday, ordinary folks engage their own culture, as their culture is now marketable, right? So different people gonna have different kinds of dealings with, oh, yes, this was something that my grandfather sang, or my grandmother sang, and now someone's come and recorded it. And now someone has not only recorded it, but they're starting to make money off of it. You see what I'm saying? So in that particular time, the 1920s, 1930s, had this concept called the race record. Anybody heard of this concept? The race record. Anybody help me out here? What would be the most salient thing for us to know about the race record? In terms of like how Black American cultural production is perceived? What would be the most important thing that we would need to know from this particular advent of the race record? What's the point? Let me ask this way. What's the point of the race record? Anybody know? Want to take a stab at it? Don't be shy. All right. Is that you again, Dominique, in the back?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm gonna guess a race record is basically the music made from African Americans, or I don't know why Elvis keep popping in my head.
Yeah.
Like somebody that would take a Black person's song and make it into their own, and I feel like people would know like it's a race record. Like I don't know, you know.
Yeah, you're close. You're close. You're close. You're close. All right, let me try it this way. Let me see if I can get it closer to the bones of where you are in time and space. Anybody know Lil Nas X?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not that old. All right. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I know that they call it race music also, like same thing, right?
To a degree, yes.
It was mostly, I would like to say, like secular music written and sang by Black people, and like they would think it was, I don't want to say demonic, but it was further from righteousness.
Yes, but oddly enough, though, to add to and complicate what you're saying is race records were recordings of not only Black secular music, but also sermons of Black preachers, right? And also folk songs of Black that were had a local ethos, but people from the recording industry, similar to the folklorists like Lomax and William Francis Allen that I just mentioned, similar to the folklorist tradition, they were after these recordings because they were trying to represent the Black race as a marketing genre, right? So the race record is one of the main reasons, is the starting point for why Lil Nas X was not accepted as a country music singer when he did that album with who was it, Billy Ray Cyrus?
Yeah.
Old Town Road or whatever. My little daughter sings it all the time. I don't understand. She's only 5 years old. It's not even, it's weird. But anyways, yeah. But he was getting all, Billy Ray Cyrus was getting all this flack for bringing a hip hop artist and a queer male hip hop artist at that, right? We can get into some of that in a minute. Into that picture, into that scene. Well, the race record is the beginning of the racialization of musical genre. So bluegrass became white music. Country music became white music. R&B became Black music. Blues music became Black music. But all of these artists in these genres knew each other and were in creative exchange, right? But the industry decided that it's best for the selling of records. And so the race record was originally meant to market to Black Americans, but guess who bought most of the race records? White youth. Sound like hip hop to me, right? You look at the record sales of hip hop, the most avid buyers are Japanese and white American. At least last I checked, that may not be the case anymore. Or is hip hop still a thing? I don't know. All right, so that's a short and long answer to your question, John.
Okay. We're running out of time because I asked this last question, and then I'll turn it over to the students who have a question to ask before we round up. So overall, how then did the blues enter theology? What's the relationship?
Yeah.
Oh, and then what's the impact today?
Yeah. The quick of it is this. There's never been a separation between what we call the secular and the sacred. And John, you back me up if I'm on good ground. Prior to the Middle Passage. So in other words, African faith traditions in the West in particular, there's no dividing line that's a clear mark between what we would call the secular and the sacred. So what you see in culture is also infused with what we would call, even though this term doesn't work everywhere, religion. So African-American cultural production in some way is a statement about not only faith, but also the notion of the self and self-consciousness. So if you can imagine that the advent of race, the advent of gender, the advent of class politics that would have emerged to maintain colonial outposts and the plantation were so damaging and injurious that it tore people from their gods, it tore people from their language, it tore people from their culture. And so any statement about what that experience is like is going to draw upon whatever is available to try to put that self-consciousness back together, right? So in some ways, you are rendered, as Charles Long would say, the historian of religion, of study of Black religion, he would say, the experience of the Middle Passage is an experience of being rendered opaque to oneself. You ever feel like you're in a room for the first time, you don't know anybody, and you may know yourself, but you knowing yourself doesn't pass the test because you don't think that anybody in that room will know you, right? And the ways that they engage you, the ways that they dialogue with you is as if your knowledge of yourself doesn't matter to them. And as you try to make them aware of who you are, they constantly tell you, that doesn't make any sense. What are you? Are you an alien? You don't come from here. Who are you? Right? And you constantly do that, right? So I would say that the contact, the connection point between the religious and the blues, or the theological and the blues, has to do with the blues is trying to make a statement about what it means, as Du Bois would say, to be Black in a racialized world. The blues is a statement on that. It's not only a statement on that, but it is profoundly a statement on that. And insofar as it's a statement on that, it enters into the religious, right? Or it enters into a conversation that many people turn to the religious to approach. So the questions of who am I, right? Just that one question, who am I? Many people turn to the religious to answer that question. Oftentimes in my Black Baptist tradition, the answer to that question, well, you a child of God, right? And so the blues says this, but it's asking that question at a level of the sensuous. And I say that, I talk about this in my book, Decolonizing Revelation and Spatial Region on the Blues, the sensuous. If you can think about what it means to be an enslaved person, all of what it means is a repression of the full range of what it means to be human. And there's so much surveillance upon the enslaved. So the blues begin to kind of move into a conversation with the body. Now I'm in dangerous territory because your professor wrote a whole book on the theology of the body, right? But it's a re-engagement with the body after this notion of repression. So if you look at what a lot of the themes in the blues, it's about losing a lover, falling in love and then losing a lover, right? It's about the celebration of the body in dance, right? Because the blues is ultimately, as one commentator, Albert Murray, would say, dance music. It's also about women in particular taking a hold of who they are in their bodies outside of strict codes of conduct that would have been being promoted by African-American churches engaged in uplift movements, right? That means we're trying to save the race. So people like Mary Church Terrell and others would be symbols we could point to in this. Or have you ever seen like Ida B. Wells in her pictures? She got her collar all the way up to her neck, and she's very circumspect and very composed, right? very radical in her thinking, but very visually, very composed, right? That respectability politic. I know that may be a term that y'all are familiar with. The blues kind of resist that because it basically says no matter how respectable we might seem, or no matter how respectful we might enter into negotiation with the white world, it's up to them whether or not they take it. Right? They could just as soon cut you off where you stand as you are being respectful. Right. And so the blues basically say, why go that way? Let's be fully in our bodies. Let's not repress our bodies. Let's love on our bodies. Let's engage our bodies. And sometimes at an extreme, right? So you get into like, wanton sexuality. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a problem, but it's an embrace of the flesh. It's an embrace of the body in ways that some Christian traditions within Black American communities were resistant to. Saying, no, we can't do that. We can't love our bodies out loud. We can't love our flesh out loud, because if we do, we're going to be too associated with the animal, and the animal is already a symbol that they done thrown on us to say that we can't be next to them, right? So we don't need to give them any help in doing that. And the blues has been saying, that's a bad bet.
Right, thank you. Well, your turn. If you need to clarify or ask anything, please signify.
Oh, multiple hands. John, can you call out the hands? Because I don't have the right angle to see all of them.
Let's start with Alicia.
How do you see the blues today, knowing that like times has changed since like what you were talking about before? Like has the blues like changed into something else, or like has it still been the same but just like I guess like it's like the aim is different?
Yeah, what we're seeing now, you see the blues form and the blues tropes symbolizing people like Megan Thee Stallion. You see it in some of Beyonce's work. And then you all could probably help me with other adjacent artists to those aesthetics, right? Y'all know the artist better than I do, but you know the aesthetic that I'm talking about, right? Okay. And so what these folks are doing, particularly I would say like the work of Beyonce, is they're very similar to what Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, Ida Cox, and other blues women were doing. And basically what they're saying is, this form that I have, this body that I have is a form, right? But I can control this form. Aesthetically, I can control it. Economically, like Ma Rainey was a very business-minded woman who was very industrious on what they called the tent show system in vaudeville. And she made sure she got all of her money in ways that a lot of artists did not do at her time. She was ahead of her time as a kind of economic guru. And so in today's time, you see that kind of economic sensibility in how artists are owning their own masters and different things like this. But that aesthetic of being a proud, open person, particularly with regards to sex and sexuality, and controlling that aesthetic, right? I think is what you kind of see now in the music industry. In the 90s, it was less of that. What you had were, and you still have some of this now, where you had men representing women, right? Primarily. Now you have women who are independent artists, and they still may use the tropes of sex and sexuality and hypersexuality and so forth, but they see this as sex positive, right? They see this as their own expression, even though they may be using tropes that don't have that aren't distinguishable from the previous tropes of the past, which we associate with misogyny, right?
I had a question, I guess, in terms of you, like, with you writing your book, do you ever feel at times like conflicting things between, like, I guess, your understanding of faith and now as you're kind of growing into Buddhist, you said that there's sometimes like contrasting and like kind of butt heads with each other in some of their concepts.
Yeah. I think you said, is there contrast between like the faith perspective and the blues perspective? Is that what is that the heart of your question?
Like, yeah, and also how you kind of are also like working through that as you were writing your book.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Black and Baptist and, very, very circumspect, very, very pious. Don't drink, don't cuss, don't smoke. Wait till you're married to engage your body in any kind of sexual way. And so those dynamics were very familiar to me. And so the conflict comes when, what does theology, where in what ways do like standard forms of theological interpretations of the body not do justice to the hurt that bodies have encountered, to the repression that bodies have encountered? And sometimes it's the artists that get us closer to doing that work than the preachers and the theologians. And so the theologians and the preachers can learn something from those who are doing that work. So like Toni Morrison's work in Beloved would be a great example of a writer using literary art to do that work in the character Baby Suggs, where Baby Suggs says, love your flesh, love your hands, love your neck, because out there, they're going to rip it apart. Out there, they're going to put it to labor. Out there, it's a commodity, right? So we have to do this work of this loving of the flesh. And so much in Christian tradition, oftentimes the repression of the flesh is what brings you closer to the divine, right? So not yielding to the temptations of the flesh, right? So you move away from the flesh and try to keep that at bay. But when you have been racialized as Black, your flesh is actually a marker of the thing that people beyond you are trying to keep at bay, right? So how do you like peel back those layers of oppression, gender oppression, class oppression, racial oppression, right? And how do you peel back those layers so you can get to your actual flesh? So before you even make a decision about the relation between your body and your flesh and your body and your soul, the world has already made that decision for you. So you're trying to deal with the resistance to internalizing that, as well as trying to deal with what the text says you should do, right? The text being the Bible, right?
Okay. Now we have about only 3 minutes, so we have 2 questions. I'll let the students ask the 2 questions, and I'll let you deal with it in 2 minutes. Morgan, no more? Okay. Dominic, we have only 1 question.
Okay, knowing that we learned that humans are capable of unity, I realized that was like because of music. Do you believe that music is a viable tool to make global social change? Like, could that be something that could create global social change for all of humanity? To create that kingdom of God, could music be like a forefront way to create that?
Yes, I think it definitely can be a part of the mix. It can't do all of the work, right? But it can do the work of helping people to be reflective about the things that we might have in common, and then being open to the things that we don't have in common, as not being a stop sign, right? So like it's an entryway into the harder conversations, right? It's an entryway, just like food is in travel. Like you go someplace for the first time, you try the food, right? And then it's an entryway, right? It doesn't give you the whole thing, but it's an entryway that goes through something that we do have in common. Like we have a response and sensors to sound. Next question, before I get caught up and talk.
Okay, it's done. The Morgan, she kind of chickened out, but
don't shut them down.
But our time is literally up. One last comment before we go, and I think I'm just going to say it so when they go for Thanksgiving, if they remember, it's something to think about. Now, when you talked about Beyonce, during the lockdown, she came up with this beautiful video. It's about an hour long, something King, I can't remember what it's called. But when you watch that video, it was a white man actually, when I was living in Pittsburgh, who drew my attention to it. More than 80% of the artists who worked on that video are Africans. And they're coming from the perspective of Afrobeats. Okay, so we have now the collusion of the after effect of the blues as it has resonated as jazz, come out as hip hop, R&B. Now there's a kind of recycling of music to create, I don't know what we're going to call it here, but you start thinking about it and we can put further conversations on these when the students are not there.
Yeah. I mean, there's global flows. The aesthetic leaves one place, goes to another, gets some change, and goes back. And then when it goes back, it's it's received and promoted differently. Yeah.
Well, I would ask Ms. Zora Thomas on our behalf to express our thanks for your generosity of time. You guys must realize that I'll have him back for the next class at 1 o'clock, the other class. So, and you only agreed yesterday, so.
Yes, yes, I have a written letter here. Thank you for taking the time to teach us here at Xavier, from Fordham. As Father John told you, talk about the Blues and Black Theology. So obviously as students here, like the only Catholic HBC in the country, taking this class, we've been able to do a deep dive in the history and foundations of our African roots and how they've come to bear fruit within our African American culture in the modern day, and how it strengthens our faith and creativity also, as you talked about, expressing through music. So as we're coming to a close in the class, we're grateful for the depth of musical analysis and musical history and how it ties into the practices of Black theology. Music is a core part of who we are as people and how it empowers us to go forward. So we thank you for your time and we wish you a happy holidays.
Thank you so much. Please give them my email information if I can be helpful you anywhere in your career from now till forever. Just email me. All right. Bye-bye.
I'll talk to you before the next class.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
You gotta quickly.
Thank you.